This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Well, that was a fun weekend. Woke up on Saturday morning thinking this weekend was just going to be smooth sailing with the wrestling talk. And then I saw the notification from Peacock for WWE Backlash. And I was like, oh yeah, that's this weekend, isn't it? Completely forgot. The only good thing about it is that the start time was on noon on Saturday. Thank God for international time zones. I don't think I've ever done that with a WWE pay-per-view recently. But that's how little I was actually thinking about this next PLE. Never even crossed my mind that it was this weekend. So that ate up a window on my Saturday afternoon. Well, I'll get into that show in just a minute. It's not going to be a thorough breakdown like it was for the WrestleMania card. Trust me. I had very little to say about that Backlash special. Before we dive into all that good stuff, let me take a minute to welcome everybody to the Five Starr Wrestling Report. We're here on Mondays and Fridays for new shows and new content. Make sure you all subscribe, comment, and like the show for me if you have not already. You can either watch the show on YouTube or Rumble. You cannot catch us on the cock, unfortunately. But you can catch WWE on the cock. And that's where we caught them over the weekend for this WWE Backlash special. Caught them right in the cock. Actually, is that even the name of this show? I keep saying WWE Backlash, but isn't it technically WrestleMania Backlash? Who even knows anymore? Whatever it was, I watched it. The question is, did I instantly regret it? You know what the funny thing is with these WWE Premium Live specials? Even when they announced the start time of 12 p.m. Eastern, I still know that I can easily get up, go to the bathroom, brew a cup of coffee, do a load of laundry, come back, and they'd still probably be only halfway through the entrances for the first match. That is how predictable these things are. So right at the top of the hour, I go off and do those tasks, come back in the room about 15 minutes later, and that is when I realized they are still on the pre-show. I don't believe the actual card began until like 1 o'clock. Of course, I had that all on as background noise while I was doing some other stuff around the apartment. I will say one thing about this Lyon crowd, and this is sort of the added benefit of when WWE goes international. This crowd was hot. They were super into just about everything on the card. Yeah, they had their lulls at various points in the show, but on general principle, they were a wild bunch. I had no idea French people could be that boisterous. So at approximately 15 minutes after the top of the hour, they finally rang the bell to start the first match on the show. What was scheduled to be Kevin Owens and Randy Orton versus Tama Tonga and Solo Sikoa in a tag match. As of this point, I had officially wasted an hour and 15 minutes of my life waiting for this fucking show to actually accomplish anything of value. It's amazing how much wasted time is blocked out for these PLEs. Let's be serious for a minute here. Do they actually need the 4-hour block for the streaming service? Or is that just built into the contractual deal? So here's basically everything I wrote down about the opening match. Again, keep in mind, I just wasted over an hour thinking the main card was supposed to actually start at noon, when in actuality it began at 1 o'clock. Both teams get into a pre-match fight. The bell never rings. They eventually send out the peanut gallery to try to separate everybody. And approximately 2 minutes later, Nick Aldis comes out and announces that this match will now be a street fight. Yes, an impromptu street fight in the opening match of a pay-per-view card because the wrestlers decided, we're not going to follow the rules. Instead of, being fined or suspended. No. Instead, they were rewarded for being degenerates. So when the bell rang and they all immediately started crowd brawling, I said, fuck this, I'm out. I'll come back in the room when the match is over. Our first opportunity to get a look at Tama Tonga in action and see what he can bring to the table in WWE. His very first match with the company. It is a garbage street fight. As if that was supposed to spotlight him in any efficient way. I was so pissed. So while that was on in the background, I was simultaneously watching Ben Shapiro obliterate Taylor Swift's most recent album. That was highly more entertaining. And about 15 minutes and 4 years later, I looked up at the TV and saw the spot where Owens drove Tonga through the 4 chairs in the ring, with basically an inverted brainbuster. So in addition to Tonga's first match being a street fight in WWE, he also probably got a concussion out of it. And right as Owens was going for the pin, that is when we get the debut/return of Camacho. No, I'm not kidding. That's who it was. 10 years to the date. The same guy we're currently watching do battle with Adam Rose on these WWE Retro NXT shows. That guy just made his return to the company to help the Bloodline win. Now, of course, they didn't call him Camacho here. He went by his real name, Tonga Loa, the brother of Tama Tonga. Another recent signing from New Japan, apparently. I guess Loa's contract was up there, so WWE decided to pick him up and pay him more money. That's amazing. At the same time, we're just about to talk about him on that NXT show later, too. Here we are a decade later, showing back up in WWE in one of the top programs on SmackDown. Well, hopefully they get it right with him this time around. But yeah, that was virtually the entire first hour of this fucking show. A garbage street fight and a returning name from years past. Was it worth watching until we got to that point? No. Anytime I see the use of plunder or even hear the mention of something being a street fight, no DQ match, I immediately tune it out. I don't even think twice about it anymore. I'll gladly follow the Bloodline stuff on TV if the story build is worth it. But I'm not watching them in a garbage match for 15 plus minutes. especially not in the opener. And speaking of things I tuned out, I did the same here with this three-way girls match. Bayley wrestled Naomi and Tiffany Stratton for the women's title. And Bayley retained, predictably. Listening to the crowd during this thing, that is where I convinced myself that these people were literally just out there trying to amuse themselves. There is no possible way they were that into this match. Fucking over an hour in by this point, we hadn't seen one actual goddamn wrestling match. We've seen a garbage street fight with the boys, and subsequently a three-way girls match where technically it's also no DQ, because that's just a thing in WWE apparently. It's too much to ask for in 2024 to get one match on a card that isn't gimmicked up all to hell. What really pissed me off here was seeing Naomi hug Bayley after she lost. I was like, are you kidding me? You just spent the previous 12 minutes beating the shit out of each other, and then magically you're all buddy-buddy after the bell rings? Fuck off with that shite. I'd have fined both of them if I were running things. That exposed the business in so many egregious ways. So then we get Jey Uso and Damian Priest for the World Heavyweight Championship. Not a title match I was particularly looking forward to seeing. But up until this point, it was the first match I decided to watch in full. I don't know, man. Jey Uso, of all the guys, nah. That's what I get out of him. He's just meh. I don't get the hype. I don't buy main event Jey Uso. I never did. The whole yeet stuff, it's just, it doesn't jive. The whole thing is so artificially forced. And like, I get it, maybe from their vantage point, they probably think it's necessary to capitalize on that big WrestleMania win he got over his brother. What many people considered one of the worst WrestleMania matches in history. I wouldn't go that far. Certainly wasn't any good. Here's the problem. Number one, nobody actually thought Jey Uso was winning this match. So even though the people were on their feet doing the yeet chants, you knew it was all for show. They're all just raw dogging for the camera. They were doing that all night. The other problem is that, even though, yes, I'm happy to see Damian Priest finally get his chance to get a run with a world title. Probably like 2 years too late. But at the end of the day, it's still the secondary title. No matter how the company tries to spin it, the Raw World title is always going to play second fiddle to the WWE Championship. The one that Cody has. And there's already so many freaking belts in this company to begin with. When I see Damian Priest come out with that championship, it just kind of looks like another top guy holding a belt. Gunther had more prestige as the Intercontinental Champion than Damian Priest does right now. And like, nothing Jey did in this match gave you the impression that he was suited for this position. Had this exact same match happened in the States, probably would have been the most lifeless, blasé world title match in pay-per-view history. But because of the crowd, it probably gave the segment more life and energy than it would have had it taken place in, say, Chicago or Miami. I just don't like Jey Uso's matches, man. I really don't. They're just... I honestly don't even know how to describe it. Unnatural? Jerky? The way he moves and the way he does shit, it always looks so overly theatrical. Am I wrong in that assessment? Somebody hold my feet to the fire if I'm just overanalyzing it, but watch closely when Jey Uso works his matches, man. He does the most bizarre movements with his body. They're so eccentric. It's like he's trying so hard to look like a convincing ass kicker, but it doesn't look convincing at all. It just kind of looks silly and cartoonish. Almost as cartoonish as WWE continuing to flash up those QR codes on camera during totally random segments. I'm not that unobservant. Oh, I know what they're eventually going to do. No, not looking forward to it. But like, I mean, the match was just okay. Got a little ridiculous with all the near falls toward the end. You know, there were probably like 3 or 4 moments here where it should have ended earlier, but it just kept going longer. The interference from Balor and McDonald were annoying as fuck. You know, just made the ref look incompetent for not ejecting them after it was patently clear they were interfering right in front of him the whole time. And like, I get they're trying to get over the story right now that Priest is getting fed up with the Judgment Day. I mean, he's probably going to turn face before not too long. But they do the deal here where McDonut or McDonough, whatever his name is, he throws Priest's foot over the bottom rope. And then Jey ends up taking both crash dummies out on the floor. Then he and Priest do some little awkward thing on the top rope where Priest hits Jey with a South of Heaven chokeslam and gets the pin. And then he gets all bent out of shape when the 2 lackeys keep trying to stomp on Jey after the bell. Honestly, I don't even know what else to say about it. Predictable match. Kind of overstayed its welcome. Jey Uso does not work for me as a main event babyface. And at this stage, you know, I'm just kind of fed up with everything involving the Judgment Day altogether. Even though the bulk of that story is being developed on Raw, about 99% of the time, we're seeing the Judgment Day work these premium live specials. The formula is just so lather, rinse, repeat now. There's no evolvement. There's no growth. We've seen the group. They're not really going anywhere beyond the mid-card at this point. So just cut the cord with it. Move Priest on. Send Balor and McDonald away for a while. I guess Dirty Dom is going to be out of the picture now because he's injured. I don't know what the fuck happened there. But I think they ought to let the taste wear off. Because at this point, they're just prolonging something that everybody knows is coming. And then up next was the girls' tag title match. Another match on the show that I just kind of phased in and out of paying attention to. Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair challenging the Kabuki Warriors. Again, maybe it's just a smart fan cynic in me talking. Does anybody not expect this Cargill-Belair team to end with somebody turning on the other? I guess it's a matter of deciphering who it's going to be. I don't know. When they put these two together, the whole thing just screamed makeshift pairing to me. I mean, we know why they put Jade in a tag team. I think anybody that can't see through that is fooling themselves. I wasn't really blown away with Jade's performance at WrestleMania. I don't think she contributed a whole lot to that 6-girl tag match. This go around, I'd say she got a little more of a chance to be spotlighted. From the stuff I did see, you know, her and Bianca were clearly working out some double team spots behind the scenes. It's like a lot of Jade's performances, though. Some of her stuff looks okay. Other stuff looks plainly rehearsed and choreographed. And you can chalk it up to her being green all you want. At some point, the training wheels are going to have to come off. The day's going to come where she's going to have to work that big singles program. Presuming it'll be with Bianca, that'll be the ultimate sink or swim moment for her career. I mean, them putting the straps on Bianca and Jade here was obviously the right call. I don't know if the plan is to have them carry those belts all the way through SummerSlam. Maybe they have them drop them sooner so they can eventually feud with each other and do the big blow-off for SummerSlam. Again, I think it all depends on how soon they're willing to pull the trigger on Jade's singles push. But for now, they're going to give it a shot with Bianca and Jade as the tag team champions. Cool. We'll see where it goes. But let's talk about the main event. The only match on the card really worth giving a damn about. Cody Rhodes defending the WWE Championship against AJ Styles. What was easily the highlight of the show for me, although the competition was purely non-existent. Now, that's not to take away from anything they did. In the back of my head, I already figured going in this was going to be the best match on the show. You know, it is the first time we're seeing these guys ever meet one-on-one for a match, but they're also ring veterans that know how to piece together a competent main event title match. It was logical. It was sensible. It had ebb and flow throughout. But at no point was it ever too much. You know, here's the thing when it comes to kickouts and near falls in wrestling. As long as they're not spammed over and over again, and the match reasonably builds up to those big dramatic moments, I'm fine with the near falls. I think the problem these days is that there's an over-reliance on it. It's why I didn't like that Damian Priest-Jey Uso match. Because that's all it was. It was big move, kick out, big move, kick out. But this actually told a logical story. They worked really well together. I love that they kept everything mostly in the ring without having to revert to floor fighting or crowd brawling. You know, when they did go out to the floor for the big table bump with AJ, they actually milked the count-out sequence before getting back in at 9. Probably would have hit home better if we already didn't see 9,000 fucking table bumps before this one on the same show. Get an agent. More specifically, get an agent with a fucking clue. But again, they took their time with everything. They actually wrestled. There's a novel concept. There was no furniture involved. Minus the table bump, I guess, if you want to say that. I think I actually saw Cody break out a back body drop at one point. How rare is it these days that we see a simple backdrop? When they fired up, it had energy. When they were working body limbs, it made sense. It's really not that hard, man. When you see normal pro wrestling, it usually winds up being a surprise these days. If I had to make one negative critique about it, I can maybe argue it went maybe 3 or 4 minutes longer than it needed to. They were starting to lose me a little bit in the last several minutes after AJ had cut off Cody during the big comeback. You know, they still did good stuff together, but I don't know. They kind of cut off the momentum there for a while. They were kind of trading moves again, and I don't know. Kind of got a little cluttered there. But Cody eventually sprang up. He hit the cutter, followed it with a crossroads, and got the pin. You know, Cody retaining was pretty self-evident. I don't think anybody actually expected AJ was going to win this match. I guess the clean win some people may consider a bit odd. I don't know if they're going to immediately move on from this program and have Cody go on to his next challenger of the month. Maybe they'll try to work in one more match with these guys for the Saudi show and add a bigger stipulation. It's hard to say. But whatever they decide on, you know, it'll be another feather in the cap for Cody's title reign. I know a lot of people are banking on the idea that he's not going to be a long-term champion. I mean, if they are going to take that strap off of him anytime soon, they better have a damn good reason to do it. right now, the only guy that I would even consider being in possible title contention to beat Cody, probably Gunther. But that's a big probably. I mean, I don't think they're going to put the strap back on Roman anytime soon. Gunther would be a safe bet. How soon do you want to do that, though? That's the problem. It's very dicey. 2 years they spent reaching this journey, and you're worried now they're going to fuck it up, pulling the trigger too soon. But all in all, that's all I got for Backlash. I was not very gripped by their efforts on this one. Frankly, I was underwhelmed and bored for a lot of it. Again, there were only 2 matches that I really thoroughly paid attention to. The ones that I passively watched. They didn't really do much to engage me. The Tonga Loa debut is kind of interesting, I guess. They're obviously setting up some kind of Bloodline versus Bloodline angle for later on. And that'll only be interesting once Roman comes back. And I don't expect that to be for another 3 to 4 months at the very least. The stuff with Jade Cargill and Bianca Belair could be interesting if they actually make the turn worthwhile. But again, from there, it's all about sending Jade out on her own to see what she can do. Can she do the long pay-per-view level singles match? The ones she had in AEW were never any good. And that's mostly because she had jack shit to work with in that division. Bianca's good. But is she good enough to carry a long competitive match out of Jade? I don't know about all that. But their next stop in the PLE library is the King and Queen of the Ring Saudi show. So I guess they're going to have a bunch of tournament qualifiers on TV going forward for the next month. Great. More tournaments. Just what we needed. Will it be any worse than the WWF King of the Ring from 1995? That we'll have to see. And maybe that would be a good way to segue into Retro Raw. Shall we? So Vince opened up this week's show with a $1 million statement. He said, "A lot of questions to be had on this week's show." Indeed. Questions like, will this show not be a steaming hot turd for a change? Actually, that was me thinking that. Well, I got my answer. The answer was no. It still largely sucked. Technically, this was the go-home episode before their first In Your House pay-per-view. Going into this show, I had almost completely forgotten what the world title match was. And then once I reminded myself that it was Diesel and Sid, I immediately started regretting it. But, well, stuff certainly happened this week. I would not call it the most effective go-home show to try and sell last-minute intrigue for the event. But that also implies that there was any intrigue to begin with. They actually promoted a couple major promos this week, which is sort of weird for Raw. Normally the matches take priority over any of the in-ring talk segments. Unless you had a King's Court advertised. It's not too often you hear him say at the top of the program, so-and-so is going to speak. And nowadays, that's all you look forward to in WWE. Because the matches are usually completely skippable. Before we get into all that, we need to fleetingly talk about this Doink Jeff Jarrett match that opened the program. I wrote approximately 2 things down about it, and we're not going to belabor it. Jeff Jarrett regained the Intercontinental Championship from Bob Holly, And fuck Doink and fuck this match. That is all I care to comment. The 1995 version of Doink in WWF has now generated the Orange Cassidy heat from me. I don't care what segment he's involved with. I don't care what story is being pushed at the time. Anytime I see Doink and Dink on my TV, my immediate move is to fast forward. The fact that they let this run through a commercial is a travesty of justice. Jared won, in case you need a clarification on that. And that led us to another first promotional vignette. Last week they blessed us with the Hunter Hearst Helmsley skit. If you'd like to hear my comments on that monstrosity, just go check out last week's show. This week, we get our very first look for another WWF original monstrosity. This time in the form of Sonny and Skip, the Body Donnas. And, well, there's a lot I could potentially get into with all this. For starters, you watch this 30-second pre-tape, having never seen anything involving Tammy Sitch in your entire life. You can easily identify how much of a glory hog she was when it came to the cameras. And this was still before they introduced Dr. Tom into the picture and they actually had him as a recurring tag team. Of course, at this point, Tom was still heavily involved in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, so he wasn't around full-time to be able to come in immediately with Chris. I guess I should point that out, too. Factoring in there might still be some people out there that don't know a whole lot about Chris Candido. I mean, if you haven't already seen the Dark Side of the Ring episode with him and Tammy, I'd encourage you to at least go check it out and get some general information on their careers. I mean, it's a tragic tale as old as time. And of course, if you know Tammy's history, it's even more catastrophic. But I won't bore you with the details of Tammy being a career fuck-up. Here is what I will say about the Body Donnas. Beyond the fact that it was another rotten gimmick idea from Vince that was never going to get over. I mean, remove all the stupid character traits they pitched to the talent involved. On their own, Chris, Tom, and Tammy. I mean, obviously with the men, tremendous in-ring talents. With Tammy, her skills always came with her being a natural personality on camera. And she was incredibly easy on the eyes, so that helped. I mean, it was just never going to work out in the WWF. Because Chris Candido and Tom Pritchard were not the kind of guys that Vince typically pushed hard. You know, they were smaller guys with not the most blaring personalities. And they could work their asses off. But that never mattered in Vince's world. Because he had a certain look that he prioritized for all of his top guys. And Chris and Tom didn't foot the bill. So from day one, you knew their careers were fucked. It's not like the Body Donnas were a gimmick that the audience was ever going to see as serious. I mean, they pretty much let you know straight up. Yeah, these guys are a joke. And they pretty much got booked as such. I'm trying to remember. Didn't Chris get jobbed out to like Barry Horowitz on multiple occasions before the end of the year? I don't think it's until Tom comes in later in 96 where they actually start racking up some TV wins and come off as more than just underneath guys. It's just a shame. Because if you were like me, and you actually went back and saw footage of Candido and Tammy and Smoky Mountain later on, you just kind of look back at stuff like this and it irks you even more as a fan. Like, how the hell did Vince drop the ball with these guys? I mean, he at least kept Sunny around so she could flash her tits up on camera during the Attitude Era. He got a little bang for his buck on that investment. Chris, not so much. But get ready. The Body Donnas are coming. In all their splendor. But getting back to the show here, we had Vince bring out Sid and Ted for an interview. Sounds like a really bad sitcom. Sid and Ted. I just realized how goofy that sounds. Guess I could be more specific. Psycho Sid and Ted DiBiase. And, well, you know, we often reflect back on these old NXT shows and complain about how generic and bland the interviewers are. How's this for a line of questioning? Vince holds the mic out in front of Ted and goes, "Well, Ted, how about it?" Riveting icebreaker from Vince. Could you get any more generic? So he gives Ted the platform here to ass-splain himself. How in the world we got Sid to join forces with the $1 Million Corporation. And as expected, the explanation made virtually no sense. Ted explains how he was the one that suggested Sid as a bodyguard for Shawn after he and Diesel parted ways. If that did happen, I certainly forgot about it. So chances are it didn't actually happen and they're just grasping at straws. And as he's putting over In Your House and talking up the big title showdown between Sid and Diesel, they keep doing this awkward thing with the camera while they're panning in on Sid's face, where they're like constantly shifting and turning it so that Sid's head is almost at like a 45-degree angle. God, I was getting motion sick just looking at it. It was horrible. And finally, he gives Sid the chance to speak, which usually goes about one of two ways. If you know anything about Sid Vicious doing promos, it's either horribly disastrous or horribly comical. I have heard some amusingly great Sid Vicious promos during my day. This was not one of them. He begins his promo by talking about the history of African lions. Not making that up. I thought he was going to break out his inner Jesse Ventura impression and start talking about the jungles of Laos. Instead, he referred to this lion pack as the greatest lion of ever of all time. Classic Sid botch right there. And after talking about the greatest lion of ever of all time, he called himself the master and ruler of the World Wrestling Federation. And then he screamed a bunch of other incoherent psychobabble before his ruler of the world line. And got to admit, this was not one of the stronger WWF interview segments I've seen. You know, I figured with Sid being out there, we were at least groomed for some high-class comedy. Instead, he just trailed off into obscurity and started talking about wild animals. I was like, what the fuck does this have to do with anything? Then I remembered, oh wait, it's Sid talking. No wonder it doesn't make a damn lick of sense. It did not get me stoked to see that title match anymore, by the way. And then we went back to the ring for Akushi versus a man who Vince identified as Scott. Not Scott Hall. Not Scott Steiner. Just plain old Scott. And he looked like a plain old Scott. I don't even remember the last time I saw Hakushi wrestle a singles match on this show. This may have been the first. He did some martial arts inspired offense. It was all very boring. He ended up going over with a springboard splash. I got nothing. The first match I actually paid attention to on this show, and all I got out of it was, guy does some boring offense for a while and wins with his move. I mean, nobody cares about Hakushi or the gimmick. And why would they? They've been given no reason to. The guy was brought in literally just to do a job to Bret Hart. I don't even remember if he's around much afterwards. He's certainly not involved in any high-profile feuds after this. And then after their pay-per-view card update from Todd Petting Zoo, we get the TV main event. Again, I'm not joking. This is what they advertised as their TV main event for the week. It is Owen Hart versus Bart Gunn. Yes. They booked Owen Hart versus a Smoking Gun. And not even the relatively good worker by comparison. They went with Bart. In what universe this would ever qualify as a TV main event, I have no earthly clue. Amidst the cavalry at ringside, we had Billy, Mr. Fuji, and Jim Cornette hanging out. When Vince asked for the whereabouts of Yokozuna, my first inclination was probably catering. At some point early on in the match, Vince also had another barn burner of a comment. Because he had already been dominating Owen since pretty much the onset, he then tried to suggest that Bart Gunn was a better singles worker than Owen Hart. I howled with laughter. Of all fucking people to claim is a better worker than Owen Hart, Bart Gunn? Really now? The moment Bart got cut off by Mr. Fuji, that immediately disqualified him from any conversation about being a better worker than Owen. He got tripped up by an immobile houseplant. So they're in there doing some stuff for a while. The entire story of the match was Owen was completely incapable of doing anything offensively unless his managers interfered. So he had to rely on the fat manager and the old guy on concrete roller skates to bail him out. And it finally led to the spot where Bart's setting up Owen for the superplex, but JC trips up Bart so he crashes and burns. And then Billy runs over and crotches Owen on the top rope. So then a minute later, Bart just stacks up Owen and pins him with a cradle. Pretty much clean. So not only did Owen have to wrestle a singles match with Bart Gunn this week, but he also lost. Hell of a way to get your new champions over, am I right? I didn't even realize the title match for In Your House was Owen and Yoko defending against the Smoking Guns. I mean, I guess that accounts for why they had Bart go over here. You know, it's that 50-50 booking in WWF where, you know, the champs are bound to retain since the challengers got one over on them a week prior. Didn't make it any less insulting. Owen doing a job for Bart Gunn. Under any circumstance, that should be a crime. And before we wrapped up the show, we had one final plug for the Dream Home Sweepstakes. And if there's one thing about Todd Pettingill that I can confirm would be a sure thing, it's him getting berated by women for wearing shoes in the house. That's all I care to comment on that clip. So we'll see about this In Your House pay-per-view. I would like to try and make it a recurring part of the WWF Retro reviews. I don't know if I need to spend copious amounts of time talking about every card from top to bottom. You know, for the first one, I might delve deeper into the matches. But, you know, since we're already doing the big fours, we may as well include the In Your House specials as part of the review series. They're not historically great pay-per-views from what I remember. I mean, just the simple fact that their first one had Diesel and Sid in the main event for a title. What do you want me to say? So I need to see what I want to do for next weekend. Do I want to include the Raw after the In Your House? Keep with the consistency with the Raw recaps? Which means I'll definitely be cutting SmackDown from next week's Monday show because I'm not about to try to sit here and review 4 segments in one sitting. Or do I skip Raw afterwards entirely? I think that all kind of depends on what we see on SmackDown that's even worth discussing. Again, I'm strategically doing very minimal discussion on those shows for a reason. But I'll keep you posted on that next week. So, Retro NXT. Have I ever mentioned how cringe this show can be sometimes? Cringier than me actually using the word cringe. It's like, sometimes I can't tell if this show is geared towards single lonely males that never get pussy, or children under the age of 9. And I especially notice it when the girls come out and wrestle. You know what, fuck it. I'm going to get right into it. Since we're on the subject of the girls, they had another one of these first-round tournament matches with Emma and Charlotte. Now that Paige has been stripped of the NXT Divas title. But, within the first 20 seconds, the announcers are joking with each other about how fun it is watching Emma pop her bubbles. You get Charlotte and Sasha coming out and doing their whole schoolgirl act. They all perform like over-dramatic Barbie dolls. Again, who is the targeted audience in situations like this? Because it ain't me. I will say, Matt Bloom had a great comment here while he was bickering with Renee. Renee's talking about how girls can be friends, but when it comes down to brass tacks, they'll fight for what they want. And then Matt just goes, I beg to differ on that. I don't think girls can be friends. And Renee, shocked and appalled by this comment, just goes, why? And then Matt bluntly goes, I'm a married man, Renee. And then there's just silence on the other end for a full 10 seconds. Now see, that is where NXT can sometimes appeal to me as a fan. Adult humor, because we all know it's true. And ladies, don't even try to lie. Y'all hate each other. When Giga Chad walks in the room, you let me know how that friendship works out. So anyway, I was pretty much trying to find ways to amuse myself while this match was going on. I was only really half paying attention. The commentary team was giving me plenty to work with this week, though. Renee at one point mentioned something about special brownies that she obtained from Emma. So they pretty much let the cat out of the bag that Emma's a weed addict. Which actually explains a lot. If you actually look at her gimmick and think about it for 2 seconds, yeah, I could totally buy this chick is high. As a matter of fact, didn't she get in trouble for illegal substance possession? Or was that a DUI? I seem to recall Emma getting arrested for something while she was still employed with WWE. But it was so long ago. Anyway, so here's what happened at the end. Emma went to pull out her fake Socko gimmick. It was actually a replica Cobra sleeve. Because apparently she was doing shit with Santino Marella on the main roster at this point. I have no idea. But when she went to hit Charlotte with it, Sasha jumped on the apron, which led to a very awkward sequence where Emma took about 90 steps to run towards Sasha and knock her off the apron with a Cobra strike. And then Charlotte just rolled her up and pinned her. I could try to elaborate on the visual nightmare that was the finish, but I think I'll just leave it with, it sucked, and it looked horrible in execution. And it's ironic, because there's another first round match coming up soon with the girls that was even worse than this one, by leaps and bounds. So, well, after skipping through a bunch of network infomercial, we come back for Sylvester Lefort and Marcos Louis versus El Local and Kalisto. The Battle of the French and Mexicans. And we actually got a proper history lesson from Mr. Bloom here, talking about how Cinco de Mayo became a thing. The 1862 battle and the fall of the Second French Empire. And now, see, you all thought there was no value in wrestling programming. And it was timely, considering we were only 3 days removed from May 5th when this show aired. And it looks like the rematch battle of 1862 worked out in the Mexicans' favor here in 2014. The French lost again. Seems to be a recurring theme in French history. They were not great at winning wars. By the way, just so we can establish this, no, I had no memory of Sylvester Lefort and Marcos Louis as a tag team. I didn't even know who Marcos Louis was until they mentioned him on commentary. I mean, if they were going to bring in a French guy, should have just given Rene Dupree a call, see what he was up to at the time. I know he was Canadian, but I seem to recall him doing a gimmick similar to this in WWF at one point. Maybe it was E by then, I don't even remember. Anyway, the match was mostly okay. The Legionnaires didn't do much to impress me here. Kalisto, from what I remember, was known for doing some pretty wacky things offensively. I mean, his comeback at the end was kind of fun. He ended up pinning Lefort with a handspring Pele kick. Apparently, they're trying to build up some challengers for the Ascension, so I certainly won't complain about that. Lord knows NXT has needed some credible top tag teams for a while. So who knows? They might give these guys a run at the tag titles at Takeover. It'll be a hell of a lot more interesting than whatever the hell's going on with Camacho and Adam Rose. Remember when I asked the question, who is this show aimed to appeal to? When I watch segments like this, it makes me really want to know the answer to that question. This is an actual match that happened on NXT in 2014. Camacho versus Captain Comic. Because if you're aware, Adam Rose has a group of party posse that he dances down to the ring with. And one of these goofballs happens to be a guy dressed in Captain Comic gear. And because Camacho punched this guy out on TV the other week, apparently that meant they needed to wrestle in a match. Because if there's one feud on this show that we desperately need to belabor, it's Adam Rose versus Camacho. So Camacho beat up the fake superhero for about an hour. The crowd was so concerned for the well-being of the scrappy underdog good guy, they proceeded to chant, "Nacho Libre." Eventually, Camacho won with a running power slam. And that led to a relatively deep, intense stare down between him and Adam Rose. Yeah, this feud sucks. Not gonna bullshit. There's probably a valid reason I forgot about it. Who could possibly care? But then, we hit a new all-time low here on the NXT Retro Reports. And I'll be the first to admit, when they originally showed the brackets for this girls' tournament, and one of the matches advertised was Alicia Fox versus Alexa Bliss, dude, I was dying to fucking see this. Just out of pure amusement. I mean, there's no way it was going to be anything shy of disastrous. But I just needed to see how bad it truly was. Oh, Lordy. Did I underestimate the level of suck that was about to ensue? You know, people often claim that Jenna Sharmell match from TNA was the worst women's match of all time. I just watched Retro Raw a few weeks ago where Bertha Faye had easily one of the worst girls matches I've ever seen. This might have topped both those matches, if I'm being honest. I don't even know where to start. Well, first of all, let's talk about Alexa Bliss. You all know Alexa Bliss. Allegedly, she's still employed with WWE. We haven't seen her in 5 years. But I think she's still around. This was her debut with the company. And the very first gimmick they saddled her with, she was a pixie fairy. And that's not me being sexist. That is legitimately what they had her dress as. She wore a ballerina skirt down to the ring. She did several pliés. She smiled and twirled around for the camera to show her ass. She was a legit Polly Pocket. And like, yeah, I get it. She had a background in gymnastics. I think she did cheerleading in college. She probably had like a month's worth of training by this point. She was worse than Alicia Fox. I'm not joking. And Alicia was notoriously bad as an in-ring worker for WWE. I think the only reason you can't claim this was the worst match of all time is because it only went like 4 minutes. But it was certainly no good. There's like 3 or 4 moments in this match where you could tell both girls got completely lost. Like they're grabbing each other and pulling their heads in, blatantly trying to call shit on the fly. I mean, anything Bliss does that involves striking or punching looks visually phony because she's legitimately 5'1" and weighs 90 pounds. I mean, her going toe-to-toe with Alicia with striking exchanges looked ridiculous. I have no idea how she got a busted lip, but that was the thing that happened. And here's what I wrote down for the finish. Bliss catches Fox with some type of cradle, sort of, maybe, I don't know, and wins. That is word for word what I wrote. It was a sort of, maybe, I don't know, small package. And they indeed put over Alexa Bliss in her debut match. Called it an upset. Think about how low that bar is. Beating Alicia Fox. Being considered an upset. I would strongly encourage you to go watch it for yourself, but I would not want to subject you to such torture. I seem to recall they eventually get off the bandwagon with her as a wrestler to just try to make her a manager full time. Didn't she work with Buddy Matthews at some point? That's when I think they finally realized, oh wait, this chick can actually talk. And she's got a bitchy personality. Can't wrestle her way out of a wet paper bag. So let's try her in the manager role and see if it's any better. Now they eventually figured it out. But yeah, wrestling was certainly never her thing. She was very athletic and very flexible. Not a good pro wrestler. And that left us with the 20-man over-the-top rope battle royal to determine Neville's next challenger for the title. Which basically meant it was a job guy battle royal. Plus Sami Zayn and Bo Dallas. I mean, you all know the drill when it comes to battle royals. Anytime you have a group of guys already standing in the ring without entrances, I mean, they're all damned. In this case, the only guys that I think got entrances were Bo, Sammy, Tyler Breeze, Tyson Kidd, and maybe Mojo Rawley was the other. I don't even remember. Pretty much letting you know it's going to be one of them. And they pretty much filled the ring with the bulk of the remaining talent they had in NXT at the time. It was a very shallow talent pool looking back. As is always the case with battle royals, it's usually just a sea of bodies doing slow lumbering offense until you get down to the last 4 or 5 competitors. And I'll admit, they gave it like 20 minutes. It really wasn't much of anything until the last 5. The people were really pissed when Yoshitatsu got eliminated. But that was like the only prelim guy they actually gave a crap about. They popped big when Tyson Kidd threw out Bo Dallas toward the end. They actually chanted, "Thank you, Tyson." That's how much heat Bo Dallas had at the time. But it boils down to the remaining suspects. You had Tyson, Tyler Breeze, and Sami Zayn. That's where it actually kind of turned into a wrestling match for a few minutes here. They did some trading with elimination spots. And then it basically boils down to the classic fuck you finish in battle royals, where you get all 3 guys taking the bump out to the floor at the same time. And it's too close for the officials to call it. So out comes Hunter's big nose to hog the spotlight. And in his super raspy voice, he announces that next week, there will be a triple threat with Sammy, Tyler, and Tyson to settle the dispute. And the winner challenges for the NXT title at Takeover. So in other words, we wasted 20 minutes of your time to give you a non-finish, only to set up another match for next week that will determine the actual winner. If we didn't see it 8,000 times in WWE for the last 30 plus years, I'd probably be more pissed about it. Without looking ahead at spoilers, I think I remember what ends up happening in that 3-way. We do get a winner. It's not another bait and switch and then they announce 4-way for the pay-per-view. If it were 2024, I would expect just that. But, I'm fine, whatever. Give people a reason to tune in next week to see what happens. I get it. Again, I've never been the biggest fan of battle royals. The Rumble's different because of the layered entrances. There's always that eagerness to see who comes out next. The big surprise factor. Battle royals to me are just kind of long and blasé. You know who's involved. There's a lot of standing around and stalling. It's never really all that exciting until the ring clears out and you can actually move around. But this was harmless enough. I do like that they're actually attempting to build up some credible top guys. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of Tyler Breeze. I never was. But they're at least trying with him. So, I mean, that's all there is to it. It's Retro NXT, man. It is a show where you got some good stuff going on in the main event title picture. The rest of the card is just very milquetoast. And we've still got like another year before Hunter starts raiding the indie circuit for all the hot names. You know, right now in 2014, they're basically working with the remaining fallout from the old FCW territory. Like, I just look back at all these names during this period, and there's so many people that I completely forgot about. Sylvester Lefort, Marcus Louis. Who's the guy with all the back moles that I always forget about? Melvin Gray, Osseo Gray, whatever the fuck that guy's name is. That's just how unmemorable they are. And then you got Sami Zayn and Tyson Kidd just kind of filling out the gaps. The names people actually recognize. Yeah, it was a different world back then, man. It really was. NXT was still operating under the old model, even at this point. The problem, though, is that this young crop of talent wasn't anywhere close to like an OVW class of 2002. I mean, I don't even think Jim Cornette would have let half these guys on TV. But we'd have to ask him. Maybe that's something the cult of Cornette can motivate Jim to do. Let's go back and watch old Retro NXT shows. Yeah, he'd probably have some good input. Talk about how he would do things differently. Story for another time, as is always the case with this podcast. So, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll be back on Friday for more classic content. I think we'll begin to look at the Texas Stadium show, at least some of the initial highlight footage. Fun times ahead. And then next Monday, we'll be taking a look at this In Your House pay-per-view and see how it holds up all these years later. But I appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys soon. Take care. Peace.